Hello and welcome to week 8 of our Roman series. And today we come to the end of this journey. Now, as we get started, I have to tell you that today's Tuesday, November 3rd. It's the afternoon of Election Day. Earlier today, I went out, I cast my vote, and now, like many of you, I wait. Eagerly anticipating what's going to happen. What are these results going to be? Some people speculate that we may not actually have a result by the end of the evening tonight, which is only going to increase the anxiety we already feel a little bit more. There's a whole bunch of anxiety that's swirling around in the air right now because things are uncertain. We don't know where we're going to be heading together as a nation. We're not sure collectively which direction we're going to choose to move in. There's a lot that's out of our control right now. We can't decide through our one vote who wins the election. We can't control how other people vote. We can't even control how other people respond to who wins the election. The only thing that we can do is control our response and control how we show up in the world every single day. So as I wait, instead of constantly updating my phone to try to see if there's any news on the election, instead of sitting in front of the TV, which it's not going to help lower any stress or anxiety, I decided, let me do my work. Let me do the thing that I can control. Let me do my part in creating a world and moving us forward in a place of love. Moving all of us forward into a future that is filled with compassion and mercy. And as we sit in this space right now, and as I look at the end of a series that we've been in now for 8 weeks, I thought this is the perfect way to end Romans. This is the perfect way to talk about the thing that's in the air right now, the thing that we all feel around us. I was talking to a therapist the other day, and he said, sadly, he has to turn clients away because there's so many people coming to him right now because they need to talk about what's happening within themselves, but also what's happening to all of us together. What we're going through, what we're feeling, this polarizing election, it's something that doesn't simply affect one of us, it's affecting all of us. And moving forward, how can we heal? How can we begin to unite instead of continuing to look for ways to divide, to split us apart? Because if we don't find ways to heal, if we don't find ways to bring us all together, we're going to crack apart at the seams. And this was the number one thing that compelled Paul to write Romans. He wanted to bring this community of Christ followers together. There was a lot of division, there was a lot of disunity, and he desired to bring healing, to bring peace to this community. He desired that this community would truly be a place of love and inclusivity for everyone. So as we end Romans, I want to end with a verse that I have been carrying around with me from the very beginning. It's a verse that I've just sat with for a couple of months now. When I first read it, I thought, that's a profound statement. Because this verse is a proclamation. It's a proclamation that Paul makes about these Christ followers in Rome, but I believe it's more than just about them. I believe this is a proclamation about all of us, about how we see ourselves and how we see the world and each other. And this proclamation, this truth that's embedded in this letter is a truth that if we embrace this truth, if we grounded ourselves in this truth, I think it could bring a whole lot of healing to us personally, but also to our collective experience. So this verse, it's found in Romans chapter 15, verse 14. And it comes at the end, towards the end of this letter. It's almost like a postscript. Paul has just had a benediction, which the benediction is the ending. It's when you send everyone off on their own way. But then Paul adds a couple more things after this benediction, almost as if, whoa, before I forget, yes, I know I ended my letter, but there's a couple of really important things I have to say. And here's how he begins right after the benediction. This is verse 14 in chapter 15. I myself am convinced, my brothers and sisters, that you yourselves are full of goodness, complete in knowledge and competent to instruct one another. Yeah. Do you hear the truth in that statement, in that proclamation? Paul begins, I am convinced that you yourselves, you are all full of goodness. Does anyone need to hear that truth spoken over them right now? That you are filled with goodness? Does anyone need to believe that truth about someone else? About someone who voted differently than you? I mean, that's a hard truth to believe, to grasp, believing that we're all filled with goodness. But I mean, this truth goes back early, to the very beginning of the story. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. God has been creating. God's been creating this universe that we inhabit. And every single day after creating, he looks and he declares, it's good, it's good. On the sixth day, humanity, you and me are created. And God looks and it's no longer just good. It's not simply good, but rather it is very good. It's like the goodness just expands. Yeah, my creation is good, but now that you and me, humanity is here now, it's very good. At the core of who we all are is goodness. And Paul believes this to be true. And Paul would have plenty of reasons to not believe this. If you've been paying attention over the past couple of weeks, you probably noticed Paul was very bold. Actually, verse 15, he says, I have written you quite boldly. He was critical in some places. He did a bunch of correcting, guiding, shaping, telling this community, hey, there's a couple of places where you've gone off the rails. You are following Jesus. You're to be a place of grace and compassion, but you've lost the plot in a few places. The things that you're proclaiming to be true, well, you're not backing them up with your actions. So Paul writes this letter as a way to bring unity, but he wants to correct some of their harmful practices. He wants to show them a particular path to walk. He's letting them know, yeah, you guys are doing great, but let me give you a few pointers. There's some ways in which you're missing the bigger picture. So Paul would have plenty of reasons to not believe in their goodness. But despite all of those reasons, at the very end of this letter, Paul proclaims this truth over them. I'm convinced, despite your shortcomings, despite the times that you've blown it, that you've missed it, despite all of it, I am convinced that you are full of goodness, because that is what the Spirit has planted in you from your very birth. Imagine what our lives would look like if we believed that about ourselves. Imagine the love we would extend to ourselves if we believed this to be true. Think about the world that we live in. That truth is battered out of us on a daily basis. We're inundated with messages telling us how we're not good enough. We don't measure up. And we begin to believe these messages. These messages become the background music in our heads. They're the self-talk that we go through that keeps being repeated again and again on a loop. You're not good enough. You don't measure up. You need to do more. But Paul cuts through all of that because I don't believe they were any different back then than they are now. Messages of not being good enough have been around for hundreds, thousands of years. Someone's always been trying to sell something that will make you complete. And Paul comes with this message, which it's a message for us today. Hey, I'm convinced that you are full of goodness. Notice, Paul does not beat these Roman Christians into submission. He doesn't guilt them into a particular path, but instead he paints them a picture of who they truly are, a picture of hope. It's a picture saying, hey, this is who you truly are. You're filled with goodness. See, Paul believes that transformation happens when we believe the things that are true about ourselves. Paul believes that transformation doesn't happen by beating someone into behaving in a particular way, but rather than giving someone a big, broad picture of who they truly are and what their life could look like. And when you paint that picture of goodness, it's a picture of hope. Like, yeah, I can live into that. That is me. I do want to set my life up in a particular way so that I can live that out, so that I can live into that reality. Paul's like a parent. He corrects, he guides, he shapes, but then he says, I haven't lost my faith in you. I still believe in who you are at your core. Anyone need to hear that this morning? That you are filled with goodness? I mean, maybe we can take a moment right now and we can simply just breathe out all the insecurities, the doubts, the regrets, the past failures, the warts, the things that are true about ourselves that we wish they weren't true. The places where we don't feel like we measure up. Could we just breathe all those out for a moment and hear these words spoken over us? I am convinced that you are full of goodness. These words will transform you. This message, when you take it to heart, is a message that will change your life. And what about when we extend that from ourselves, we extend it out to everyone else? Because that is what Paul is doing here. The only reason Paul can say this is because he believes it's true about himself, but he also believes it's true about all the people that he's writing to. I mean, what if we were to believe that every single person we come across in life is filled with goodness? How would we treat each other? I understand in the midst of a messy election, it's really, really difficult to do. In the midst of an election that is polarizing and breaking us apart and making enemies of each other, it's really, really difficult. It's counterintuitive. It's not conventional wisdom to believe that we're all filled with goodness. But what if we approached everyone? What if we gave everyone the benefit of the doubt and approached all of our conversations, all of our interactions, including the ones online, believing that the person we're about to speak with, just like myself, they're filled with goodness as well? I mean, what kind of a world would that way of interacting create? I'd have to believe it would create a different world than the one that we're living in right now. I myself am convinced of your goodness. And then Paul continues. There's a second thing he says that he is convinced of. I'm convinced you are complete in knowledge and competent to instruct one another. Two words to look at. First, this word complete can also mean to be filled with. So Paul is saying, I am convinced, I choose to believe, I trust that you are filled with, you're overflowing with knowledge. Now, knowledge, it's not that intellectual knowledge. Remember when you took a test in middle school and you just memorized for the test? You crammed the night before. And the next day you just regurgitated back all of the answers. But now, years later, you have no idea what you memorized. You have no idea what you learned. It was an intellectual exercise that you went through in order to get an A, in order to perform well on a test. This isn't the type of knowledge that Paul is talking about. Rather, the knowledge that he's talking about is knowledge that is gleaned from firsthand experience. Paul says, I believe that you're filled with applied knowledge. I believe that you are filled with wisdom. Wisdom. I mean, Paul just keeps rolling these truth statements off his lips, or off his pen, rather, we should say. You're filled with goodness, but you're also filled with wisdom. I mean, do you believe that about yourself? Do you believe that you have wisdom deep within your soul? That you're filled with it? That it's just, we need it to come out so that we can all learn from the wisdom that you have within you. I mean, here's Paul, and I mean, think about Paul. He's someone who has gone deep in this Jesus tradition. And he's writing to some people who are just beginning their journeys. Some people who they're just getting their sea legs. And yet he has the boldness to proclaim, to declare that they themselves are also filled with wisdom. Paul's not trying to pump himself up, trying to say, hey, look at me, I'm filled with wisdom, listen to everything I have to say. Rather, he says, hey, I believe you are also filled with wisdom. And then the second thing that Paul's convinced of, there's three implications of this. First, well, you're filled with wisdom in order to instruct each other. So three implications to this whole idea. First, we're to all be a student. We're all students. For the rest of our lives, we are to see ourselves as students. There's more to learn. There's always more to learn. And rather than that being a daunting task, this should be something that fills us with wonder, with awe. The fact that we get to live in a world where we will never get to the end of our journey. I mean, doesn't that just fill you with wonder? I love that idea. It's the fact that we're constantly learning. There's always another step to take. There's always something else to see. I mean, we're able to live, to exist in the world with our hands open, waiting, looking around every single day for what's the wisdom that I'm going to learn today? What's the new thing that I'm going to learn? The new thing that can change me, that can transform me into a truer version of myself, so I may have a bigger grasp on this universe that I live in. And the people the scientists, people who take wisdom and knowledge deep, they realize that wisdom is an endless fountain. And knowledge, it's like a bottomless ocean. For every step you take, you realize that there's more and more steps or more things that you haven't learned. There's more things to discover. That's what Paul's saying here. Hey, we are to always see ourselves as students. There's always more to learn. And Paul is writing to a group of Christians, to a group of Christ followers who are part of a church. And when I think about a church, when I think about a community like the community that Paul is writing to, I see church as a school. I came across this idea a couple of years ago when I read this book, The Great Spiritual Migration by Brian McLaren. And he likened the church to a laboratory. He said the church is to be a laboratory of love, or he says to be a school of love. It's a place where we're all learning from each other. Now, McLaren, he was a pastor. He planted a church, and then he left the pastorate in order to pursue a speaking and writing career. And after he left the pastorate, when he started writing full-time, he said, I need to find a church for myself. I need to find a community that I can plug into. And here's how he describes exactly what he was looking for in that community. He says, I wanted and needed a church that would help me live a life of love with as little distraction as possible. I needed sustenance, encouragement, and help in loving God, loving myself, loving my wife, loving my kids and grandkids, and extended family, loving my neighbors, especially people I might struggle to love, and loving the earth. I felt that without a community and regular gatherings to help me, I could too easily drift, too easily shift into autopilot, too easily stagnate and sour. Without intentional care and relevant practices, my soul could grow weary and cold or go small and dark. I could lose my way easily. What I love about McLaren here is his humility. He was a pastor. He's a Christian writer. As far as hierarchies go, he's at the top. And here he is humbling himself, saying, I have more to learn. I need others in my life who can help me discover, who can keep me on the path that I desire to walk in life. I need others who I can learn from, who can support me, encourage me, challenge me. I mean, McLaren isn't saying I have all the answers. Rather, he's saying, I don't have all the answers. And he's humbling himself to a position of a student. I mean, that's what being a student is. It's humbling ourselves, saying, we don't have it all figured out. Life's messy. At community group this past Sunday, someone asked a question. She threw a question out to all of us, and we talked about this question for a couple of minutes, and we never came to a concrete answer. We didn't have a solution. It wasn't the point. The point was, through our conversation, through our discussion of this question, we were exploring it together. And we were hearing from each other's thoughts, what they thought about this particular question, how they might answer it. But we all acknowledged there's way more than what we are going to learn in the next 15 minutes of exploring this question together. I mean, that's the beauty of conversation. I mean, that's why community groups are so important to Awaken. Because how do you grow in faith? You need other people to talk through it all with, other people who can be there with you to encourage, to support, to challenge when necessary, other people to, like Paul, remind you, hey, remember, you're filled with goodness. You might forget it. You might not believe it, but I believe it's true about you. I mean, that's what any good church should be about. Reminding each other of the things that are true, that we're filled with goodness, that we're overflowing with wisdom. So being a student, it's the first step. It's approaching all of life with a sense of wonder and humility. And it's looking at every single person we come across as a teacher. This person, they have something to teach me. Now, this is really, really easy when it's a mentor, someone we look up to, a friend who sends a text message or through a conversation, they offer some wisdom. But even the people that we disagree with, there's some wisdom in our interactions with them. The challenge is seeing them as a teacher. Even if it's simply teaching us something about ourselves, about how we respond to people we don't like, or about how we voice our opinions. Every single person, if we view them as a teacher, there's wisdom there. There's wisdom that we can learn about who we are individually and collectively as a society. Now, a second implication of what Paul's saying here is, in order to teach one another, in order to learn this wisdom, we need to listen. We need to be people who are willing to listen. People who aren't quick with an answer. People who, when someone else is talking, we're not already formulating an answer or how we're going to respond. Are you like me where you do this? Someone's saying something and you disagree with them. Or you're chomping at the bit. You want to get this thing out there. And so they're still talking, but you're already formulating how you are going to respond, and you're unable to hear the thing that they're saying. We need to be people who are able to listen deeply to what someone else is saying. We have to be people who are willing to listen to voices that are different than our own voice. If you're on Instagram, you know that when you post a picture, you have an option to put a filter over the picture that you're posting. So this filter could make your photo look like an antique photo. It could turn your picture photo into a black and white photo. it could give your photo a bit more vibrancy. These are called filters that you place on a picture. And then you post it with that filter. See, what I believe is when we listen, we should use the filter of love. When we're listening to whoever it might be, whether it's a friend or someone that we disagree with, we need to be able to listen with a filter of love. We need to try and understand where another person is coming from. We have to try and understand their story, what has shaped them, why they believe the things that they believe. If we choose to listen with a filter of love, I believe that some of the antagonism that we have for others would begin to dissipate, and that we would begin moving forward together into a society that begins to heal divisions. Listen with a filter of love. And then a third implication of what Paul's saying here: you have something to share. You have wisdom to offer. Now, for some of you, you don't believe that. For some of you, you've been beaten down so many times by yourself that you feel like you have no wisdom to offer the rest of us. What Paul is saying here, what Paul is saying is true about you, is that there's some wisdom within you that we need. We need your wisdom. We need all of our wisdom. We need you to mine the depths of your story, of where you've been, and then to come back and report to us, hey, this is where I've been. This has been my story up until this point, and here's what I've learned. Here's the wisdom that I have come to acquire through all my experiences. This is one of the reasons why I love biographies, especially autobiographies. I just finished Matthew McConaughey's autobiography, and let me just say this. It might be my favorite book. I think it is safe to say my favorite book of the year so far for 2020. What McConaughey did is he looked back over all of his journal entries that he started when he was 14 years old. He's now 50. So he looked back over 36 years of journal entries. And he started organizing these entries and the wisdom that he found within these entries in order to present it to all of us who are reading his story. And let me just say this, the wisdom that is found in his autobiography, absolutely mind-blowing. I felt like I was just underlying and flapping every other page because there was so much there. And it started by him simply looking back over his life and saying, there's some things I've learned. There's some things I've come to discover. I mean, talk about seeing himself as a student. This is exactly how he views his life. He's a student, and he's capturing it. He's writing it down, and then he's offering it to the rest of us. This is what we need from you. We need you to go through your story, to look over your past. And there's some moments in your past that are cringeworthy. Yeah, we all have those moments. But sometimes it's those cringe-worthy moments that offer us the most wisdom, even if it's wisdom for what not to do. The painful lessons that we learned in those moments. I mean, those are the lessons that we carry with us. The moments when we were moments of hurt, pain, uncomfortableness. Oftentimes, those are the lessons that we carry with us for the rest of our lives. Those are the lessons that truly transform who we are. So Paul believes you have something to offer us, and we need your wisdom. I love this verse in Romans. I wanted to end here because for me, this is a powerful verse. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been carrying it around with me now for weeks, for months. When I came across it, I thought, we have to end here. We have to finish the story here because this is a profound truth that has the ability to change our world. We exist in a world right now that needs people of healing, people of peace. We need communities like the one that Paul's writing to here, communities Like my prayer for Awaken, communities of love, where together we explore, we challenge, we teach one another, we learn the way of love. I mean, if you want to learn about love, you need people to do that. You can't memorize some verses or some ideas and say, all right, I got love all figured out. You need people in order to learn the way of love. So when Paul writes to this community, these words are so important for all of our communities today. What if all the communities that we were a part of, church, family, school, work, society as a whole, what if we saw these as laboratories of love? What if we listened with a filter of love? And what if we were still and silent enough to go back over our story to discover the wisdom that we have gleaned throughout our years? What if we viewed, or what if we looked at each other as people who were filled with goodness? I think if we did this, we would begin to see some transformation. So my prayer for us as we go through this election week and the messiness that it entails, my prayer is that you would see yourself as filled with goodness. That your starting point would be leaving behind all the lies that you've come to believe, the lies that tell you that you are not filled with goodness. May you set those to the side. May you leave them behind for good and trust that at your core, you are good. And that's how God sees you. May you believe that we're all filled with goodness. And may that change your conversations, your interactions, the things that you speak about others, the way that you speak with another person. And may you listen. May you approach all of life as a student, as a learner. May your eyes be open, constantly looking for wisdom, for knowledge all around you. And may you offer the wisdom that you earn, the wisdom that you earn through your life, through the steps that you take. May you offer that to the world as a gift. And may that wisdom move us forward into greater peace and unity. May the grace in Jesus be upon you this week.